Welcome to The Business That Pays with Adam Tolliver from Artisan Financial Strategies, where we mind the business that pays you. In this podcast, we empower successful families and business owners to make informed decisions about their finances through courageous conversations. Through his expertise as a practicing investment advisor representative with Eagle Strategies, LLC, a registered investment advisor, Adam teaches you how to create a wealth ecosystem by combining a practical technical framework with your personal, family, and community values. Join us for this journey where Adam normalizes sustainable wealth building and gives you the keys to make courageous, proactive financial decisions.
Millennial professionals, they're no different than other professionals. Or are they? Welcome back to the Business That Pays podcast with Adam Tolliver of Artisan Financial Strategies. I'm Patrice Sikora. Millennials are being pulled in all directions: career, spouse, kids, their own parents, and maybe even grandparents. Adam, this can be overwhelming, but is it also a time when they should be laying the groundwork for sound financial growth?
Yes, thank you, Patrice. And that is an excellent question. The resounding answer is yes. Millennials are in this very funky sort of position as they are the oldest millennials being 40 years old now. A lot of them are starting to move into the peak earning years that they're going to have in their career, whether they're self-employed, running a business, or working a traditional 9-to-5. They've also got a lot of moving pieces with their families. And so millennials are in a position where a lot of them are starting to make more money than they had before. And regardless of their personal background, whether they're the first in their families to achieve some sort of financial success, or even if they have a model to go by from their parents or something like that, there's still a lot of unique challenges that they're facing today that their parents may not have faced 30 years ago. And so for a lot of millennials, they're in this phase where they're trying to figure out what exactly does a sound financial plan, what does a healthy financial life look like for me? And so that's a big part of the way that I work with clients, specifically in that age group, is starting to define what that success looks like.
I was going to say, this must be awfully tough for a lot of them to define their own financial success, especially if they don't have a model to look at.
Right. And if you'll recall, last episode, we talked a lot about benchmarking and the importance of having something, a standard to measure by. And I believe in having two standards. So we've got the global standard. What should someone my age, if I'm 33-year-old male, how much should I have saved for retirement? What type of debt load should I be carrying at this age? Like, what's reasonable? But that's obviously very broad, right? So if that's not contextualized, then it's not going to be very useful for me. So the second benchmark is your personal benchmark that needs to be tracked and measured over time. And that's a big part of what I help people in this age group, and really any age group, but especially now, if you've never worked with a financial advisor or never had a formal financial plan, it's a huge part of just laying that baseline for how am I even going to judge or measure myself for being successful or on track moving forward. And that's a lot of what we do.
And what about confidence here too? I mean, you can talk to them till you're blue in the face, but if they're still not confident in making some good decisions and looking at that financial success, how do you deal with that?
Confidence is huge. And I say it all the time. What I do with my clients, the way we work, so much of what we do is about money, but it's really about the way that money shows up in your life. And the emotions that we have surrounding money have an impact on almost everything that we do. So a lot of people are walking around with this buzzing anxiety in the back of their minds about financial issues, whether it's the mortgage, whether it's student loan debt, whether it's credit card debt. How am I going to pay for the kids' education? I'm behind on retirement planning. Whatever it is, a lot of people have those types of anxieties. Once you start to build a framework that creates some clarity, and you can actually have something concrete to say, well, yes, even if I am off pace, or even if I do have an issue that I'm working on, if you have a plan that can create a clear line to what success looks like, that confidence alone can reduce so much of that stress and anxiety.
Someone's coming into you for the first time and they've never done any financial planning before. You sit them down, you get their priorities. What comes first? What should they tackle first? Retirement? Debt? If they've got kids, childcare? What comes first?
I'm going to use one of my favorite words, and it is triage, normally used in the medical field. But if I'm working with a client, they know that they've got their list of concerns or needs, and some of those needs are things that they're keenly aware of, and then there are other things that we're going to have to tease out to figure out that they may not be aware of, but I am, because of my perspective as a professional, my objectivity as a professional. So we've got these blind spots. A huge part of what we have to do is understand the urgency of the different challenges and objectives and goals. So a client may come and say, I would like to buy a house in the next 18 months, but there may be some serious debt that we need to clear out before the house is bought. A client may say, I want to fund 50% of my two children's education. And I may be looking at their assets and saying, well, you are at about 20% of where you need to be on retirement, and that needs to be a priority. So we need to understand where everything is. Going back to what the progression of a plan looks like, we start with assessing, then we clarify, and then we track. In that initial assessment, a big part of what we're doing is getting that initial snapshot to understand where everything is. That includes what type of resources we have to go towards each of these priorities. And we prioritize based on urgency, what needs to be taken care of right away. Some things are a prick on the finger that we don't have to address immediately, but maybe we can because it's very simple. It's a prick on the finger. Other things might require stitches. Other things might require surgery. And so we are assessing based on the hierarchy of urgency, both in timeline and on things that could potentially cause further complication down the road. Does that make sense?
That analogy. Yes, it does, very much so. But then it brings me back to, it seems to me, one of the initial things you really have to look at, and it impacts just about everything else, is that debt management you talked about.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So I think almost everyone has heard the phrase "cash is king," and that's typically for consuming for consumers. When it comes to financial planning, I believe that cash flow is king. Debt management is the thief of cash flow. If you have high debt service, particularly high bad debt, and bad debt would be defined as something where you've borrowed money and the asset that you got from that debt, whether it was a vacation or some nice clothes or furniture or a car, that asset, the valuable use of that asset, does not outlive the debt that you have to pay on it. So you're still paying for something years and years after you've gotten use out of what you paid for. And so when we talk about cash flow, we're talking about, plain and simple, the difference between how much money is coming in every month and how much money is going out every month, because that difference is what we use to go after your goals and objectives, to address some of the more progressive things that you want to accomplish for yourself and for your family, how you can enjoy and lead and live a more full and fulfilling life. And so that tends to be very high on the list, and especially for this age group in particular, because they're in a very unique position with this student loan monster that many of us are facing.
All right, and you're talking about people who are in their 30s. You said the oldest are 40 right now. How do you explain to them how important saving for retirement is? Are they looking that far down the road?
Unfortunately, nationwide right now, we have what can only really be deemed as a growing retirement crisis. And a big part of what millennials have to understand, millennials and younger, so, Gen Z, as they're coming along, are going to have to think about this as well. But a lot of the traditional resources that our parents and grandparents could rely on are not available to us for retirement. There's a bunch of reservation about how much is going to be available in Social Security by the time we get eligible for that age. Pension plans that employers used to provide are no longer that common. But in addition to that, because of the transient nature of millennial employment, we tend to jump around from job to job. So we don't necessarily stay in one place long enough to earn a pension anyway from a company. But I mean, like I said, they're not giving them away anyway. They're very expensive. So 401k plans don't match as much as they used to. So all of that basically boils down to the onus, the responsibility for planning for and saving for your retirement is much more self-directed than it was 30 years ago and 60 years ago. So for millennials, a big part of that is just getting some basic knowledge and understanding of what are my options, where can I actually start to save, how much do I need to be putting away, and how is that going to impact myself and my family in the long run.
Same thing goes for this age group when it comes to having a family. I mean, have many of them thought about the cost of having a child? I mean, not just at home, but child care. If you have two career people in the house, child care, I'll tell you, it's through the roof. And that's if you can find it.
Yes, absolutely. And that's a huge, huge challenge, extremely common for so many of the families that I work with is navigating. And I can't tell you how many people I've worked with who are basically, once their children get out of childcare, they're counting it as a raise
Yeah.
because of how much they have to spend on it. And so all of those things are part of what I call navigating the money jungle. So young families are in this position where, you get out of school and maybe you got an advanced degree and you've got student loan debts from undergrad and from grad school, and then you're ready to start a family, so you pay for a wedding, and then you want to get a home, so you pay for a home, you start a family, and now you pay childcare, and the bills are adding up, as you can see, right?
Oh, yes.
And so a lot of people are in the thick of those decisions right now. It's decision overload left and right. Do we go to this daycare? Do we have relatives or family that can watch the kids until they're a certain age? All of these things to try to calculate, figure out, and getting to the other side of that and having the air clear to figure out, okay, so if I've made it through here, now what? Now what do we do with this money? And so, yeah, it can be a lot. It can absolutely be a lot.
You're talking about maybe having family take care of the kid. That kind of brings in some intergenerational issues here. And I say issues because it's not something that growing up you think, oh, I'm going to have to rely on my parents still, or even grandparents, or I'm not going to, I didn't think I was going to have to take care of them. But tell me about some of the issues that the millennials are now facing in this respect.
Yes, absolutely. So one major thing to keep in mind as you are navigating your financial world, you have to take into account all of the things that are on the periphery that may impact your personal financial plan for yourself and your family. And one of those things does include how well have my parents planned for their aging. And people don't always think about this, like you just said, but in most families, there tends to be an unspoken expectation
Mm.
of children to take care of their parents in one way or another as they get older. And that can be planned for. It's not always, because those are difficult conversations, they're uncomfortable conversations. But if your parents are getting older and they haven't done the greatest job of saving for retirement, where is their income going to come from? And most people that you speak to are not comfortable with just letting their parents struggle as they get older if they know that it's harder to make ends meet. And this gets into some very sensitive areas, but this is where a lot of strain can come on marriages when suddenly your wife or your husband is cool with your mom, but you guys didn't discuss what it would be like if your mom needs to move in. or God forbid, as your parents get older, the chances of suffering from a long-term care event where you need some sort of skilled nursing care or care in a home, what that impact looks like financially, those are costs that get they could go up to $70,000 to $90,000 a year.
Right.
And so if those conversations are not had candidly and the planning is not put in place, it can have an impact, not just financially, but it can be a strain on relationships, and mental and emotional health. And so that intergenerational planning is a huge part of what we're doing. I just believe, as a financial advisor, if I'm working with clients, if we don't address those things, I'm not being responsible. And so that's a huge part of what we talk about in our planning.
Before they have this conversation with their parents, it sounds to me like they really should sit down with a financial advisor to figure out what the questions are they should be asking.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It is one of those things where you don't know what you don't know. And these are the types of blind spots that a professional advisor can help you start to figure out, because unfortunately people are sort of hit by this, and it is one of those things that, if you've ever experienced, having to take care of an aging relative, parent, grandparent, aunt, uncle, or even witness someone else close to you do so, you probably have a really good insight on the type of stress and strain that can cause on a primary caregiver. And very important to note that the vast majority of those primary caregivers end up being the oldest daughter,
Mm-hmm.
because again, societal expectations, culturally, that's just one of the caregiving responsibility tends to fall to that person. Consequently, bit of a tangent, that's also why the oldest daughters tend to get the most in inheritance, but that's a different discussion. But again, that conversation, just being able to talk through, what is long-term care insurance, what does or doesn't pay for long-term care, what do I get out of Medicare, do I want to deal with Medicaid? All of these things are conversations that need to be had in a family structure, talking through it with a financial advisor first, so that you can get some good insight on the discussion that actually needs to be had, the subjects that need to be broached, and some framework on how to navigate those conversations. Extremely valuable.
And also, the career of that primary caregiver, is she/he going to put their career on hold, which means their income
Yes.
goes on hold, and you
Huge.
still have the additional expense of medical care. I mean,
Absolutely.
you may be providing the health care, but then there is medical care.
Absolutely. And for clarity, when we're talking about aging parents and long-term care events, a long-term care event, a triggering event for long-term care, means that your loved one is no longer able to perform any 2 of 6 daily living activities. Some of those things are things that we know happen to people as they get older, and we can more or less plan to decide, hey, like, is this something that I'm comfortable doing? But I want you to deeply consider the vulnerability of that and the personal nature of that, and whether or not it's something that you would want to be personally responsible for your parents. And really think about it in a practical way. Like, am I physically capable of moving my father from his bed to a chair, or from one room to the next? Do I want to be responsible for bathing my parents? Things like that are things that financially you can plan for, so that you can hire someone, bring someone in to do so. And all of those are very sensitive, uncomfortable conversations. But once the moment's there, it's too late. It's too late to do anything about it once the need is there.
Right. You have a note here, legacy planning. Tell me about that.
Yeah. So legacy planning comes down to, again, being proactive in conversations with your parents, but also having conversations among yourself, with your spouse, about with your partner about what is it that we want to accomplish legacy wise. And that could be for your family, it could be for your alma mater, it could be for your church or another community organization or your Greek organization. But a lot of those options become more and more limited the older you get if you have not made plans prior. And that's not important to everyone. But I do know that a lot of people really are into the idea of intergenerational wealth. They're into the idea of allowing the lineage behind them to have a better footing to start off than what they had. And they want to build on having a workable framework so that the path to financial success does not look as difficult moving forward as it did in the past. And so, legacy planning for me means having intentional conversations between generations about what you want to actually happen with the wealth that you accumulate throughout a lifetime.
How do you convince a millennial that they really might want to come and talk to a financial advisor?
The biggest thing is most people aren't going to do anything until they're ready anyway. And I believe in having open conversations and providing information and education freely. I'm happy to speak with people who, are not quite sure, don't know what's what, but also being very transparent about what exists in the way of options for them. So a lot of millennials, especially, are in this position where they are young, they're starting to generate some income, but they don't necessarily have any assets. And for that reason, our industry has coined them with this nickname, Henry's, high income, not rich yet. And,
I heard that.
it's like, yeah, great. They've got money coming in each month, but they don't have anything to invest because they're paying down all this debt. They're paying for childcare. They're still paying off their wedding expenses. All these things that they're paying for means that they do not have 500,000 or $1 million to give me to manage. And when I say me as an advisor, I'm in a unique position because at my age, 33 years old, the average age of a financial advisor is about 55 years old, and 20% of financial advisors are 65 or older. And so a lot of those business models don't make them necessarily very friendly to work with millennials. And I'm very fortunate, as I've mentioned on the podcast before, where my business model is situated very well to the point that I can work with younger professionals who are establishing themselves, starting to earn more money, and I can be in a position to grow with them in the long term. Obviously, I'm a millennial myself, so we can grow together. As my practice grows, so grows your career. And there's this joke in our industry: when you're getting trained and you're learning, they say, look for the guys with white hair and nice shoes. And so a lot of my clients do not have white hair yet, but as we're working together over time and the gray and the white comes in, I will have been there with you every step of the way.
Right. And studies have shown that people want a financial advisor who looks like them. That's tough for millennials, not
Absolutely.
just in age.
Absolutely. It is tough for millennials. And like you said, not just in age, but also in demographic. The vast majority of financial advisors are white men. And so as a young Black man, and my business partner, Meredith Moore, she's a woman, one of the best in the business. And as demographics continue to grow and change, there are so many out there who, just from a cultural competence and a language barrier, comfortability perspective, would like to work with people who look like them. And so that is a huge component or huge barrier for why a lot of millennials don't necessarily have someone to work with yet.
That's very interesting. Do you think that's going to change anytime soon?
I do. I think it is starting to trend in the right direction. I think it is an issue that our industry collectively is aware of and is continuing to work towards, not in a cheesy PR we need to do our diversity and inclusion way, but in a genuine way. I think there's a lot of investment and time and a lot of people who genuinely do care and take this profession and its value and its importance very seriously, who are trying their best to continue to build the ranks of a more diverse workforce in financial services.
Good news for millennials. So how can millennials or any other age group get in touch with you, Adam?
Yes, please shoot me an email at atolliver@artisanfsonline.com, or you can find me on Twitter at Adam C. Tolliver.
And that's Tolliver.
That's right.
And that is Adam Tolliver of Artisan Financial Strategies. To be alerted to new episodes of Adam's podcast, The Business That Pays, subscribe with the subscribe button on this page, and of course you can also share with the share button. I'm Patrice Sikora, and let's talk again later.
Thank you for listening to Business That Pays. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guests and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of the Artisan Financial Strategies or Eagle Strategies, LLC, a registered investment advisor. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial professional provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment strategies.
Adam Tolliver, registered representative offering securities through New York Life Securities, LLC, member FINRA SIPC, a licensed insurance agency. 1125 Cambridge Square, Suite C, Alpharetta, Georgia, 30009, 404-210-9311. Financial advisor offering investment advisory services through Eagle Strategies, LLC, a registered investment advisor. New York Life Securities, LLC, and Eagle Strategies, LLC are New York Life companies. Artisan Financial Strategies, LLC, is not owned or operated by New York Life Securities, LLC, or its affiliates. Neither Artisan Financial Strategies, LLC, nor its advisors provide tax, legal, or accounting advice.